You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And as always, we are your hosts for this show. So tonight it's a little bit different because we're not really covering anything. First of all, it's been a while since we've been live on a Monday. We sort of got our Friday game back, but I think it's been a minute. You know, last Monday, of course, we enjoyed chatting with everybody during the premiere, and it was actually quite a lively conversation, actually. And, of course, this week, we're pretty much continuing on the Ahsoka train. You know, I noticed that even when we're not really reviewing Ahsoka, because it's probably the biggest thing that's going on right now, a lot of the stories that are coming out, you know, besides maybe once in a while you get Acolyte news or something like that, but a lot of the stories are focused on Ahsoka. Dragonfly, of course, is with us. You know what? I'm going to get this up here now. It says, good evening.
Good evening.
Awesome.
Good evening.
And, of course, you know, we have viewers on Twitch. I never want to forget to shout out all of our Twitch viewers. It's great. You know, sometimes they even chat in, which is awesome. Of course, we have the ability to put those up, too. So, you know, welcome to anybody watching us on Twitch live right now. Anybody of course, you know, that's on YouTube, which is where we usually are. David chats in immediately. First of all, congratulations on being on time. Usually David ends up joining us a little later in the show, and he says, hello, gentlemen, I will behave tonight. Well, the good news, David, is this. The topic that we're covering tonight shouldn't necessarily trigger you in any way. At least that I...
Well, it probably will
of.
in a positive way, because this is actually his favorite character so far.
Oh, yeah, right. No, that's a good point. So triggering in a positive way is good, you know? But, I mean, look. It's funny because, you know, Chad, when I saw him at work today, he was like, you know, I kind of like the late night streams, man. They hit a little bit different, you know? And it's true. I noticed that, too. You know, I remember even mentioning to you off the air that it's like, you know, I think I might want to keep that 11 o'clock time slot even when your schedule calms down. Because what's cool is it gives you a chance to, you know, get in, even if you're working a little late or whatever, you know, you can, and then it's just like you're really chilling. And of course, you know, a lot of people that are into this stuff are up pretty late anyway. So, yeah, we had a lot of fun chatting Friday. I think we're going to have equal funds chatting tonight, because tonight we're basically talking about something that was alluded to in the last episode. Remember, during our review, we talked about Baylan and Shin and how he was giving us a little bit more expository dialogue. Well, you know, we're getting that. I guess I want to say we're getting it all at once, even though if you really stop and think about it, through all the episodes that he's talked, he's given hints about where he is. But I think the biggest hint and his connection to Anakin really, honestly, was revealed to us in this last episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and everything else. So you were basically the one that brought this one up. So I'm going to let you go ahead and, you know, give us your thoughts on it, intro it, say whatever you want to say.
So this is kind of a cool thing, because Baylan Skoll is one of the cooler characters that we've seen in Ahsoka thus far. I mean, of course, Thrawn just now making his grand appearance. No pun intended. So, but Baylan is an interesting character. He's very reminiscent of Count Dooku, as far as not just the way that he is portrayed, but even his philosophy and ideology on a lot of different things. He doesn't seem like he's completely a Sith Lord like Dooku was, which is kind of interesting, because Dooku didn't have the whole glowing, you know, yellow eyes thing like most Sith Lords would normally have, like you saw with Maul, Anakin, Palpatine. He seemed relatively neutral, but a lot of the Jedi looked at him as very disillusioned. They kind of just considered him a disillusioned Jedi, and that seems to be kind of where Baylan is. Baylan, he's not quite a Sith Lord, as far as we know, because he doesn't go by a Sith name, Darth anything, or to that effect. Um, but he does carry around an orange bladed lightsaber, not exactly red, which shows that he's kind of more towards the dark side, but not all the way there.
You know how many people I've
So
had to debate? There's a lot of people that think it's red. It's just the way the color is. I keep telling people, no, it's orange, and it's intentionally orange for exactly the reasons that you're saying. Is that he's not? Because remember, the way that you get the red lightsabers by bleeding the crystal and going all Sith on it or whatever.
yeah, and that's what I've always been led to believe. I mean, that's kind of the canon of it all, and
it is now.
Yeah. So when we're looking at Baylan, he has this whole conversation with Shin, and he's kind of just elaborating a little bit more on his time being with the Jedi, and he kind of has fond memories of it, but then there's also some disdain that he has with the Jedi, and especially when it pertains to Order 66. To which, for those who are uninitiated to the Star Wars franchise, Order 66 was basically a code name where that Palpatine kind of placed inside all of the clone troopers. It was basically a chip that was inserted into every clone that was created. So when Palpatine uttered the code orders execute Order 66, the clones had no choice but to just fire upon any Jedi that they saw. And Palpatine's whole thing was to eradicate the Jedi because he wanted to take over, and he knew he could do that if the Jedi were present. So he basically dispatched Darth Vader at the time to march into the Jedi Temple. He was still in Anakin form, so to speak, but he had been changed to Darth Vader. Anakin goes into the temple. He wipes out as many younglings as he could, along with a whole battalion of stormtroopers, clone troopers. And arguably, as we know, some made it out, whether they were there actually at the temple or they may have been elsewhere on other planets and they just weren't caught, as evidenced by Grogu, evidenced by Reva. So, and Kanan is another one. So there's evidence that, and of course now Baylan, and Baylan is another character that survived what's called also known as the Jedi Purge or the 66, whatever the case may be. So now here we are in Ahsoka, and we're trying to figure out, like, okay, what's really his deal? Like, he doesn't seem like he's completely sold out with the whole Thrawn plan, or but he doesn't completely seem to be on the Jedi side. Of course, he kind of has a fondness for Ahsoka because of who her was, number one, being Anakin Skywalker, but it seems like he does have a bit of a disdain for Anakin. So there's a lot of different things that's working here, and we kind of want to delve into that a little bit tonight.
Well, and I mean, I think that one of the things that you got to look at, so there's a few things, right? I mean, first of all, we think that he may have survived Order 60. Well, he obviously did, but I mean that he was at the Jedi Temple at the time that this had happened, right? So the other thing that you have to look at as well is the fact that unlike Grogu, who, when you look at Grogu's memories of Order 66 and how he survived, he only ran into clone troopers, whereas Baylan obviously ran into Anakin because there's not a whole lot of people alive that know who Anakin became. That's a big thing. In fact, usually if anybody revealed that secret, they would be killed pretty much on sight.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
So, from that standpoint, I think that there's a lot that we can dive into because you have a couple of things here. Number one, like you said, Baylan's not even as much of a Sith Lord as Dooku, because Dooku did take on the whole Darth Tyrannus name. And, he seemed to be a little bit more on the side of Palpatine the Sith. He knew what the plan was. he had become what I would say was a lot more disillusioned than what I think some of the other people were. Now, Baylan, on the other hand, he actually seems like, and he even alludes to this in the last episode of Ahsoka, where it's kind of like Thrawn's just a means to an end for him. It's kind of like, okay, this is a way to get, he's just basically following along, but he has his own agenda. He's got his own plan. He's not necessarily on board with the whole Empire thing either. It's just, we're just going to
using Thrawn to get what he needs.
Yeah, exactly. He's using Thrawn to get what he needs. So I honestly think that this is a really cool thing that we can look at, because there's all the stuff that obviously happened with Order 66 and, how Baylan feels about that, and his direct connection to Anakin. You got to wonder if Anakin knew who he was. Thrawn certainly knew who Baylan was. So there's a little bit there. And then, of course, what does that mean moving forward in the show? Now, we only have 2 more episodes. Episode 7 basically premieres tomorrow, right? And we'll be reviewing it Friday, of course. But yeah, there's just a lot that you can delve into here.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to get this
comment in.
Yeah, from Peter Griffin. He says, "We talking Baylan's names on his wrist?" I don't know if I noticed that or not. Did you notice anything like that?
I
didn't either. Yeah.
But
you might have to clarify that one. Clarify that one for us, Peter, and we'll delve into it.
Here's the thing, and we often talk about writing when it comes to Star Wars, about bad writing versus good writing.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that has been sort of on the outskirts of things, a little that has been very good for Star Wars. I'll put it this way. The concept of the notion of the Jedi and their philosophy, I like that aspect of where Star Wars seems to be going in some aspects, because we've seen glimpses of it, of course, in the sequel trilogy, with Luke talking about disassociate himself from the Force, not completely kind of going with the Jedi thing. He was kind of he kind of looked at the Jedi as a failure, and that's how Baylan looks at things. He's like, okay, and you really think about it, once again, I don't know if this is evolution or if this is a testament to Palpatine's great design, quite honestly, because initially, if we look at the onset, the original purpose of the Jedi were to be keepers of the peace. They were supposed to be ambassadors that kind of went out on these little missions that kind of tried to help keep the galaxy, everybody on an up and up, really, for the most part. But then comes the Clone Wars, which Palpatine orchestrated, and his whole plan of orchestrating this was because it was to allow him to ascend into power. However, within that, though, it caused the Jedi to abandon their original intent and become something else.
Right.
And they became soldiers, which Mace Windu pointed out in Attack of the Clones. He's like, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. So when you take the concept of, okay, here's what our original intent was, and then it's kind of flipped on its head to now we're doing more than what we set out to be. And it's kind of like, okay, now it begs the question, okay, are the Jedi still needed? Is the Jedi philosophy relevant anymore? Because it's like so much has transpired, and like if Luke was to rebuild the Jedi Order, for example, would he build it to be keepers of the peace, or would he make it to be soldiers, kind of, or was it something completely different now? And I think this is a very interesting thing, and I think this is the backdrop of a lot of stuff when it comes to Baylan. It's because this is why he's training Shin. He even told Shin, he's like, no, I'm training you to be something more. But what is that more? What does Baylan see that he feels that the Jedi didn't see before. And this is things that we've covered before. Dooku's felt the same way. That's why we keep making a lot of comparisons to Dooku, is because Dooku kind of saw like, okay, look, we're getting too involved in all this politics. This is not our lane. This is not our area. Let the politicians do their thing or whatever the case may be. We're supposed to just kind of serve in the best interest of, I guess, the people in a way. But it's kind of hard when you do have the politics who are running things. It's like, okay, well, you kind of have to uphold the law. But then if you see something that's wrong, do you break that law because now you're a vigilante? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you're working outside of the law, you become a vigilante. It's a very slippery slope. And I think that's also why it breeds a way for Jedi who may not have the discernment to understand a lot of different things to easily slip into the dark side, because you may be thinking you're fighting for something noble and you're really not, or your intentions may be slightly askew in that, and that's all it takes sometimes. I mean, we look at Anakin, a lot of times he did things, he was a kind of a renegade or a wildcat, or a maverick, if you will. He would kind of just do things, as he saw fit. He didn't always abide by the Jedi code on a lot of different things. And that's the other thing too, because the Jedi have their own set of rules, but then you have politics that have their set of rules, and those two don't always intersect well. So Baylan is kind of looking at things like from the perspective of the concept of the Jedi. I like what they were originally trying to do. I was for, but then kind of what they became ultimately became their undoing, because they're trying to keep power. The Empire is trying to take power. And now we have these two warring factions that causes all this devastation pretty much in the galaxy. So now the question becomes, well, what does Baylan see is the answer to all that?
Well, and I think the other thing you got to look at, I mean, so many points here, and plus I got some chats I got to get to, but overall, one of the things that never really occurred to me much until you mentioned it is the fact that, Palpatine wasn't just blocking the light side and keeping his own identity mysterious and allowing himself to operate as a Sith Lord without them really knowing what was going on. He was actually sowing the seeds of dissension, of doubt, of, disillusionment, all these things, and pretty much corrupting the Jedi from within, because it wasn't just a situation, like you said, where you're taking these guys whose objective is just to keep the peace and fabricating this war to turn them into soldiers. That was kind of like a phase one, I guess. The second thing is, now you have the Jedi fighting amongst themselves, because philosophically, they're moving away from what they're supposed to be or what they once were. And now they're just like, they're finding themselves at odds with their own belief system.
People, yeah.
And the other people. And then, of course, you had the external, because it was very easy for Palpatine to paint the Jedi into traitors, because the people were starting to get disillusioned with them too. Because, again, they were being maneuvered away from what they actually, what their main objective has always been. And everybody saw through that, right? I mean, you even had Obi-Wan and Mace and Yoda at various times talking about that. During, like you said, during Attack of the Clones, during Revenge of the Sith, they could sort of see it happening, but they were really powerless to stop it at that point, because even they themselves were a little clouded. And then you had Ahsoka, who walked away because she got disillusioned. You had, of course, now you have Baylan, who's Dooku, even Luke to a certain degree, especially around the time of The Last Jedi. So everybody's gone through this little period of disillusionment, doubt, almost resentment, whatever the case may be. So where Baylan's concerned is that he's sort of in the middle, I think, because you're right. I think he likes, and he even said as much in the episode. I mean, I kind of like what they once were, or something like that, or the idea or whatever, but I just don't like what they became or or anything like that. Okay, so now basically Dragonfly, Ted, they pretty much interpreted what Peter was talking about. Dragonfly Mass says fans translated a list of names he had. He was basically saying Baylan has Skywalker family names and droids on a list, which is interesting because I had missed that. He corrected it. And then, of course, we got Dan the Man with us tonight. Hail Star Wars Podcast. I like this. Do our intro. Too much to get into with Jed Abeloth, the hit list, World Between Worlds, Let's Go. It's like, oh, yeah, look, I mean, there's like a ton of stuff that we can veer off on. And, of course, you know, usually the chat on these shows, I mean, sure, we got the title, what the episode's about, what we're initially going to talk about. But as anybody who's watched this show for more than a couple of weeks can attest, we get off on some tangent. Actually, last Friday, because what was the actual topic? It was something to do with Thrawn, I think, wasn't it?
Last Friday was about the episode. So
no, not last Friday, last Monday. Last Monday's premiere. It was like another one of our sort of offish type topics or something, and it turned into an entire Ahsoka discussion, even though the actual topic of the show was like, all right, you know, let's try to get this thing back. But it really doesn't matter. I mean, you know, we're going to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, honestly. And then, of course, he corrected Baylan has Skywalker family and droids names on a list. I miss that.
You know what? I just ran across something like that, and I didn't get a chance to look into it. But yeah, apparently there is a thing where Baylan actually is trying to, and I think you alluded to this, Eric. I think it's past Friday when you were talking about how Baylan wants to use the World Between Worlds to go back and stop some of the things from happening.
Yeah, I did bring that up.
Like if he stops Anakin from doing, you know, what he did, and if he
right,
it's basically something like he has the Skywalker's name on a hit list where he's trying to, like, if these events don't happen, then none of this other stuff.
And we did talk about that. I don't remember if it was last Friday or maybe it was the one before or whatever, but we did say that his ultimate thing, or at least that's one of the theories going on, is that he wants to use the World Between Worlds to basically right the wrongs. Because I mentioned that it sort of rips off the plot of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's a very similar thing, you know, but you know, it's the Star Wars universe. So Baylan wants to go back and pretty much right the wrongs. I don't know if it's necessary for his own power. I think it's just to, you know, make things right or whatever. So Peter goes into more clarification. He says, sorry, I thought that was the Anakin connection. He has Luke, Leia, Han, Ben, Chewie, R2, and C-3PO. I'm beginning to remember this now, actually. I'm guessing a hit list, or could be people he would give a pass. Well, he's definitely going to give Luke a pass, because there is no way in the world that Baylan's powerful enough to take out Luke. Now, of course, if it's obviously he's going back and he's taking him out when he was still a wide-eyed farm boy on Tatooine, then yeah, sure. You know? He goes on to talk about, he says, Theory has a video today. He means Star Wars Theory, the like, pinnacle. It's what all of us Star Wars channels want to be when we grow up. A quick 3 minutes. Which would be quick for Theory, actually. Because he gets really deep into a lot of the stuff. I enjoy his channel a lot of times. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely, you know, that type of a thing. But I mean, because you got to go back even, look, when you're dealing with this whole Baylan Skywalker connection thing, which is pretty much what we, you know, said that this episode was. So we might as well get a little bit into that, right? A couple of things could have happened. And again, we should give a shout out to ScreenRant.com, because this is where we sort of got this article. This is where we kind of sourced everything, and you know, sometimes what we'll do is whoever writes the article will say basically, okay, this is what they said, and then we'll dissect their points and break it down and maybe give our own things or whatever. But basically, the article was talking about, look, there's a couple of things that could have happened during Baylan's encounter with Anakin. Because we're assuming this is during the Jedi Temple, and like you said, Order 66 is happening. So either Vader failed to kill him, or he chose to spare his life. And this sort of mirrors, in a way, the backstory that we find out about Reva from Obi-Wan, right? Because he basically spared her life. She became an Inquisitor, that whole thing. And we really don't even know when Baylan, because we know where he is now in the post-Return of the Jedi world. I don't remember if they ever said that this guy used to be an Inquisitor. And, that's generally what they did with Jedis that they didn't necessarily kill or whatever. It's like they more or less gave them the option. Maybe they were a little too powerful. Palpatine wouldn't want to risk it. I don't know. It's a little crazy, but I mean, it's even possible that maybe Baylan was Vader's secret apprentice, a la Force Unleashed, or those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the article. Let's see. Let me pull this thing up, because I actually have it. I had it ready. I like to reference these things. So it also talks about Order 66 would explain Baylan's fall to the dark side. If Anakin ran, or he was spared, or whatever, it's basically like, okay, he fell away from the Jedi. He wants to be more. And of course, the article talks about something that you primarily, and I've chimed in too, where Baylan and Dooku are very similar as characters, in the sense that they both had that regal kind of, gentleman's. They're like a gentleman's Sith. It's like,
yeah,
they're kind of, those, like I said, more regal, stately, I guess would be another word that you could put in there. Whatever you could say that would imply classy, that kind of thing, right?
That was like they're from the Game of Thrones era or something.
Exactly. It's very chivalrous, that kind of a thing. I mean, they definitely had that whole deal. And this is good. This is good. I'm waiting for it to pop in. Sometimes my internet can just get a little crazy. Here we go. Dragonfly Mask. We're bringing the D&D in, guys. He says, more lawful evil than chaotic evil. And that's exactly it. You could even say that Baylan is even almost lawful neutral. And I say that because we don't know the end game yet, but you could make the argument, like this pendulum could swing the other way. You could see him not necessarily being redeemed or whatever, because he seems to be, whatever gets him on the path that he's on, he'll side with either one. But yeah, I would go for lawful evil. I'm good with that. Peter Griffin's like, play you in a game of chess before they kill you. Exactly. They're classy. Exactly. They're stately. They're, all these other adjectives that I could come up with to describe these guys, but you get the idea. I mean, they got a very regal type of a thing going for them. And that's actually a really cool thing, I think, because I wanted to see more people that were like Dooku, actually. Because I thought that, while you don't really want to rip off the Dooku character, really, you can see that style or that type of disillusioned Jedi happening. And I think that it's great because Baylan does have a lot of similarities to Dooku, but not necessarily ripping him off. It's not like cookie cutter, the same character. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, that's it. He's, Anakin's obliteration of the temple was an inevitability that Baylan realized too late. Now he wants to end the cycle once and for all, and he believes that Peridia may be the origin of the Jedi and the struggle they were caught up in, which is why he's gone with Elsbeth and Thrawn thus far. So these things all do make sense. There's a lot of theories. I know a lot of YouTubers have been out there going with a lot of theories, but these things do make sense, right?
Yeah, and you can really think about it. It's like, okay, a lot of people kind of look at, especially from that time period, you could see that unless you knew. So in Balin's case, you kind of wonder like how much does he know, right? Because on one hand, of course, we know he knows that Anakin became Darth Vader and he basically marched into the temple and just wiped out everybody as Palpatine per Palpatine's instructions. Now we he knows that part, but does he know who was behind it? Like, does he know about Palpatine as far as does he know that Palpatine was the one who orchestrated, who's behind Vader doing all that?
Well, that's a good question because, as we know, one of the reasons why Palpatine put Vader out there was to sort of be the face of the Sith almost, right? Because that allowed him to operate in the shadows. And there's a lot of people in the Empire that go, okay, this Vader guy has all these weird powers or whatever. And the Emperor is hardly ever seen. You know, they do all the holonet stuff and, you know, I think they even altered his appearance a little bit or something like that, and you know, made him a little bit more made him basically a little bit more like the Emperor or even the Chancellor that they knew. I mean, obviously everybody knew he got disfigured. I mean, he made that work for him, but I think what ended up happening though was the fact that he used Vader to sort of be the bad guy and be the representative of them, the Sith. I mean, people didn't even necessarily know that Vader was a Sith, really, but they knew that he had some powers and he was not to be trifled with, right? So the Emperor basically rarely was seen in public, actually. So you're right. I mean, we don't know if Baylan knows that Palpatine... I mean, we're making that assumption because... But then again, Baylan's rising up after Palpatine fell. So it could very well be that he's a Force user that, unlike some of the previous ones that we've seen where their lineage traces back to maybe post-Clone Wars, you know, when Palpatine took over and it's like, okay, like Thrawn, for example. You know, Thrawn was in the Empire, rose to the ranks, he was a Grand Admiral. He was part of the Empire proper under Palpatine, and then rose to more prominence, kind of. I mean, he was exiled.
And
but
plus, Thrawn was in the upper echelon of the Empire, too. So it's not like, by him being a Grand Admiral, it's not like he's just Admiral Piet or something like that. You know, even they knew, they saw the Emperor, of course, at times, because he would make his little stops here and there, like, okay, you know, the Emperor's coming here, you know, and everybody was freaking out because it's like, okay, you know, but that the fact that Thrawn was kind of around and he knew, like, okay, Thrawn being Thrawn, you know, like, okay, he knows how powerful Vader was and how powerful, you know, or Anakin / Vader. He knew someone had to be as powerful or equally powerful or more powerful than him that he would even listen to him. So it's just like, okay, you know, it's almost like, you know, who's holding Vader's leash? You know, everybody kind of thought it was Tarkin at first.
Well, but you got to remember, I mean,
the smithereens.
It's true, but I mean, it very much follows because once Thrawn was discovered by the Empire, you know, and this all happens in the new canon books. I mean, he meets with Palpatine pretty much right away. I mean, he knows exactly who Palpatine is, what he's about. He may have even met Palpatine before Vader, if I got my facts straight. I don't 100% remember, but I'm pretty sure that that's how it worked out. So, you know, yeah, he's one of those guys that's a good example. But even beyond that, right, even if he was an Admiral Piet style or whatever the case may be, a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was a legacy Empire guy. Baylan, we don't know that. He may be a legacy Empire guy, but he also might be just some opportunist dark side Force user that once the Empire fell, you know, he knew enough about it that he just started. Because if you think about it, like Thrawn, of course, Thrawn's exiled, but it seems like just from the very beginning, he's not really working with the proper, even the remnants of the Empire, really. He's sort of, you know, he's aligning himself with Morgan Elsbeth. He's like it's kind of like the ancillary character, right? The sort of on the fringe. So we really don't know how steeped in this current, like these remnants or whatever, he really is. And I mean, obviously when Thrawn addresses him, he remembers him from way back. Now, the other interesting thing, and maybe anybody in the chats can chime in with this too, and I got a couple more chats that we got to get to, but by all means, let us know. And if you remember, say something. But I don't recall whether or not when he was talking about, General Baylan Skoll or whatever, it's like, well, does he mean general from the Clone Wars, which is what I would assume he's talking about? Or was he a general in the Empire? I mean, I don't remember if that distinction was ever made.
That's a valid question.
I
would say, but I would probably say he's more referencing the Clone Wars.
Oh, I would absolutely say he was referencing the Clone Wars.
I would put my money on that more so, because if he was a general in the Empire, I don't think he would be wearing what he wears. Those guys kind of, they got to toe the line, so to speak.
But if uniform. And the other thing too is that I don't know if a Force user would be a general either. It's whereas Jedi were generals in the Clone Wars, so
true, and that's what I'm saying. But even if he was like you would probably put him more as an Inquisitor,
right,
than a general. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I mean, it's an interesting thing. All right, so Peter Griffin's got a bunch of chats here. He says, I could see Thrawn saying, F it and tell them to kill them all before takeoff. Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra, Baylan, and Shin if need be. Baylan would turn if they threatened Shin. They kind of alluded to that, really, because it seemed like he was ready to just, take off and, yeah, whatever. I mean, if we don't need these guys anymore. I don't think that Thrawn has any allegiance or whatever to Baylan either. He has an objective. He pretty much, they got all their little mystery crates and all that stuff loaded on. I think it's go time for them. So,
yeah,
because he seemed to allude to the fact that, hey, let their, they're chasing Ezra and Sabine, let their fate be whatever it is. We got a schedule to keep,
Basically.
He goes on to say, did he know, or did he read Ahsoka's mind like he did Sabine with Ezra? Ooh. He goes on to say, I don't know. I don't think Ahsoka would let him read her like that, so he must have known Vader or Anakin. Yeah.
I think he definitely knows. He's definitely old enough to be, back then.
Sure.
So, and to my knowledge, he's probably older than Anakin.
Yeah.
So I could understand. I mean, and that's the cool thing about Baylan, so we really don't know a whole lot about him as far as his master or where he was, or just the particulars of this character.
Yeah, like his Jedi thing, right?
Yeah, which I'm sure, hopefully, we find out more within the last two episodes. It's unfortunately that Ray Stevenson, the guy who actually plays Baylan, unfortunately has passed on. So unfortunately, he won't be reprising his role as Baylan. But once again, we don't know if the character has got
some serious technology.
Well, unless we get hey, I mean, you could technically now with AI. I mean, if they want to,
Well, here's the thing that I find really tragic.
Get permission from the family or something like that, and just use his likeness, and you could do it.
Well, that goes into what Ronaldo was saying, where he thinks that you should probably be recast or something. That's when we threw out all those people, remember? But,
Speaking of which, I do have another name that could actually play him. You're going to love it.
And?
Jonathan Frakes.
Oh, I could see that.
Look at it. I mean, especially now.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Especially now.
The beard. That's what I'm saying.
He did, and he can regal it up a little.
Of course.
Peter says I could put a helmet on him. Well, but here's the thing. And this is just to, piggyback a little bit on this unfortunate passing of Ray Stevenson. For some reason, I don't know why, but what's been popping up on my YouTube suggestions or whatever has been a lot of the Star Wars Celebration clips. Now, Star Wars Celebration was like April 3rd or something like that. And it turned out that Ray Stevenson ended up passing like in May. Like toward the middle or end of May. Like he was literally weeks away from his death when he was giving those interviews. And that, because I sort of remember the interviews, because, with Star Wars Celebration, you're just like blasted with like 6 hours a day of stuff. And then you start to watch it. And a lot of times what I end up doing is I'll then go back and I'll just watch like the clips, because then they'll put up clips from the day of some of the key interviews or whatever. And I think I saw them at the time, but it was just really weird looking at it again through that lens where, he's all like hopeful, and he didn't look like he was sick. He looked completely healthy and everything was fine, and he was just talking about his thing, and I'm just like watching this going, wow, dude, you're literally like weeks away from dying, and you have no idea. That always freaks me out every time like celebrities die or whatever. I'll do this even with people, that I know. One of the first things that I'll do is I'll actually go to their last like social media posts and see, because a lot of times, they had no idea, and it's just, I don't know, it's just one of those like really weird, freaky things that I always do or I always think of. And, it just made it even more sad because he was just really into this character and he was into playing this character. So,
well, I can obviously see why, and it's probably he saw the potential of what this character could be, and that's what made it so cool. I mean, David brings it up all the time, like, as far as like, the acting, the gravitas that, Ray Stevenson brought to Baylan is awesome. And yeah, I for once I couldn't agree more with David,
No, speaking of which, it's like you said he was going to behave tonight. I guess he hasn't said anything. I guess behave means not talking at all. Hey man, whatever does it for you. All right, so Ted Adam Green has a couple. He says, I think Baylan knows what Anakin did and saw him kill the younglings, exactly, and wants to get revenge on Anakin's children. Well, that's interesting. Also, I think he wants to wipe out Jedi and Empire to stop the cycle. Definitely that.
That's a very good point, Ted. Yeah, that's a very astute point, because I think he sees problems with both factions. And his whole thing is like, if you just get rid of both of them, we don't have this problem at all. So,
life is more or less getting revenge on those two, though. It wasn't all, because Leia's reduced to just being a general again because she's on the outs of the New Republic or whatever. No, she ended up being a general in the sequel trilogy, remember?
Oh, yeah, talk about that. I thought you
Resistance, yeah. No.
Prior to.
But before you go on, he says, go back to whatever, he's just finishing his point. Go back to whatever was before the cycle of the evil Empire / Jedi. That'd be the New Republic. If you want to go like the last big thing, I guess you could do the whole.
Before the Empire, it would be
the Republic. It would just
be the Republic.
Yeah.
It would just be the Republic. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had the High Republic era, which was kind of what's supposed to be, I guess, the peaceful, the Jedi are at their zenith, the galaxy, like everybody was kind of happy. There was no war, because the Acolyte ends up taking place, in the last bit. I think
like 50, 100 years or something.
Yeah, or something like that. Because the whole High Republic era is like 200 years or something. And it's sort of like maybe the last 50, 70, something like that, that the Acolyte takes place, where you start to see a little bit of that rise of the Sith thing going, which there's enough time before the Phantom Menace that you can see, okay, this is how Palpatine sort of got a foothold or whatever. It's going to be really interesting to see how they pull that off, actually. All right, Peter basically says to us, wonder what his plan for Shin could be. Bigger than Jedi or Sith? That's a
yeah. I mean,
right.
And that was about to be my next question. That was honestly about to be my next statement. Is like, okay, so if he's training her to be more, what does that really mean? And do you think so? We found something in Rebels that was really cool, and I wonder if since they're bringing a lot of things from Rebels into live action, I wonder if this is going to happen. The Bendu.
Oh, the Bendu. Yes.
So is that going to be a thing?
Well,
in Ahsoka, in a sense of not necessarily some weird creature that pops out of the ground, but I'm just saying
they got the Purgle. They pretty much ported them straight from Rebels in their current form.
Right, but I'm saying like Bendu is not just a creature. The Bendu is a lifestyle. So it's what Ahsoka is pretty much a Bendu in a way, if you really want to look at it. So is that and maybe that's why he doesn't want to kill her, because maybe he feels like Ahsoka is what he wants things to be.
Well, he basically said, it would be a shame to kill her just because there's so few of us left. I mean, I think he's just having problems like, just offing Force users because, there just aren't that many left. And so this is because, again, this is before Luke starts to build up the Jedi Temple. And of course, we, see how that went. But David comes in and says, how will it affect the show if they don't recast him?
Good question.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on how important his character is to the entire run of the show. Was he the big baddie for this season? And they're moving on past that? Or is he supposed to be... Because they could always pull a Leia, right? I mean, Leia was supposed to be the main character of 9. Like, Han was the main character of 7. Luke was 8. Leia was supposed to be 9. And they had to rewrite the whole thing and do a little bit of digital trickery to more or less satisfy that. Now, they could write him out graciously. But, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Eric, that's really the crux of the matter is, how important is he to the overall story? And I think if he's very important, then yes, you do have to face the question of either recast or do AI. Which, once again, depending on what his roles are and what he's planning to do, AI could be a workaround, because if he's not doing a whole lot of stuff, then okay, you could kind of get around it. But if he's doing a whole lot of motion stuff, whereas he's doing a whole lot of fighting, and I mean, you might be able to do like longer shots and just do close-up shots of, with the AI face or whatever. That might be cool because he's not talking, so you don't have to worry about a whole lot of, the lips and everything, the mouth, the face, and all the facial features.
Because
right.
Again, this technology, every passing month, pretty much, it's improving. And don't forget, I mean, with the Rise of Skywalker, I thought they did a pretty good job. The way they handled the young Luke and Leia sparring thing would be a great way to handle any AI type, like deepfake battles.
The only thing is that they were using they had a movie budget. As opposed to...
Yeah.
That's the only thing about it.
But it's getting cheaper, though. Because don't forget, I mean, there a lot of the Luke stuff in Mandalorian Season 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Extensive. Or not 2, 3. No, Book of Boba Fett.
2.
See, it's like, no. There was the ending scene of the season finale. I'm talking about when he was training Grogu.
Oh, Grogu.
That was Book of Boba Fett, i.e. Mandalorian Season 2.5. And that was... I mean, again, was it perfect? No, but I mean, it got the job done, and it was pretty extensive, and that was like 3-4 years ago or whatever. So it constantly gets better, Plus, if they have enough, because I'll tell you, it was when they did the young Indiana Jones thing in Indy 5, Harrison Ford was quick to point out in a lot of interviews, it's like, no, that wasn't CGI. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. He was like, they didn't really digitally, what they did was they used my eyes and my mouth, but he was like, look, Lucasfilm has like 40 years of my image, and what they did was they used a computer to find, in any given scene, find expressions, whatever, that match that lighting and everything else, and then just digitally put it on there. So if they have enough images of Ray Stevenson that they can use, it's possible they could do it the same way, and it wouldn't be the same as the deep fake. That's the reason why, if you go and you see Indiana Jones 5, why it looks so amazing. And I mean, the first, I don't know, like 20 minutes of the movie is a younger Indiana Jones. I was like, they should have just done this. Because it really felt like a classic, Indiana Jones thing. All right. Peter's talking about the Bendu, and he says, plus the Bendu turned into a cloud after that rock monster form and laughed at Thrawn. Yeah, he goes on to say, see if he lives through the next 2 episodes. Well, there you go. What I read, they make it out of season 1. I don't know. I mean, that's actually a good point, right? We're speculating well, how important. I mean, he could be dead, right? That Ahsoka might kill him.
Like,
yeah. Well, that goes along with what we're saying. I mean, how important is he? If he's dead, not so much, unless they do a Force ghost. In this case, quite literally. Dragonfly Mass says, I wager he doesn't make it, being as he is a mentor character. That's a good point, too. Right? Because you look at your Obi-Wan, he's a mentor character. Then you look at Luke. Qui-Gon. There is a theme. There is a theme that basically repeats. It's like poetry, as Lucas says. And yeah, these guys don't always make it out. In fact, I don't know, other than even Yoda. I mean, Yoda died of natural causes, but he died. So I can't really think of a mentor character in that sense that actually did make it out.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point, because your mentor is supposed to pass things along anyway. So you're basically trying to develop them to be the next, and then you go and they kind of continue what you started.
Star Wars,
basically.
they just pass.
Yeah.
First they pass along what they learn, then they pass away. All right. Peter says, I take it Thrawn makes it back to the galaxy. Do you think Ezra Sabine will have to hide in those coffins they were loading up? I guess provided they even make it back in time, right? I mean, they're...
Yeah, it seems like they pretty much packed out the cargo.
Yeah, they're pretty much, they're ready to go.
But with Ahsoka coming, see, that's the thing. It's like, they don't know that Ahsoka's on her way there. Now, the thing is, it's like, all right, now you got to hitch a ride and back on one of the whales to get back. Because it's not like they have some crazy hyperspace ring. They just parked their ship on the tongue of a whale and just went along for the ride. So now you kind of have to wait until the Purgo decide to head back to the known galaxy. And
is there like a bus schedule, I mean, is there,
right. You gotta, yeah, exactly. The last shuttle is leaving.
It's like, oh man, we got to make the 4:00 Purgle, or we're gonna. Well, it's Star Wars. They're gonna magically, there'll be one when they need one. I mean, it just,
of course,
it's just the way it goes.
Some abandoned ship that has like. The most powerful hyperdrive that there's ever known to man, or something crazy.
Exactly. Or like Thrawn accidentally, he drops something and they can, I mean, they'll find a way back without question.
It's like hypercrystal. We could, if we manufacture this into a hyperdrive thing, we could use the power from
it'll
this.
be like MacGyver all of a sudden, Right. If I just get some chewing gum and, a hanger and this kyber crystal, yeah, exactly. I can fabricate a hyperdrive real quick, The
thing is, though, at least with Thrawn's whole plan, I mean, that was actually smart, though. Like, that was actually cool. You take a hyperspace ring and you load it up with a bunch of hyperdrives, and to get you from that side to the other, and then it's powerful enough to now. I'm wondering, or maybe that's what they were carrying in those cases. It could be hyperdrives.
Yeah, we don't even know that.
Yeah,
we have no idea. It could be a lot of things.
But that would make sense though if they had hyperdrives.
It could be more soldiers. Maybe the Night Sisters are fabricating a bunch of stuff. I mean, I've heard that those stormtroopers with the red, like Night Sister like wrappings around them are called like Night Troopers or something. I don't know if that's actual like a thing or not, but yeah, I mean that's a good point too. We don't even know what Thrawn, what's he taking back? I mean, really, what does he have out there that he can load up? So I mean, it would make sense that it was soldiers or something like that, because it's like, well, what else would he have? Now, David asks a good question here. It's says, is there any canon as to what happens with Rey's protege? Of course, it's talking about Baylan, and he's talking about Shin. No, because technically, I mean, up until this series,
these are our new characters.
They're brand new characters. So, these are not pre-existing characters, or they're not even really based on anybody from Legends that I can think of offhand anyway. They're pretty much brand new. We really have no idea. That's part of why we're speculating about this whole thing, actually, because there's obviously a connection between Baylan and the events of Order 66, Anakin Skywalker. He keeps dropping. Sure, some of it is to freak out Ahsoka a little bit, but I think a lot of it too is kind of like what's been discussed here tonight, that maybe Anakin or something factors into his plans. And don't forget, we've seen Anakin pop up now in the World Between Worlds, so if Baylan somehow finds his way there, you kind of wonder if those two guys will meet. I mean...
That'll be an interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Be like, hey, remember when you basically chopped up a bunch of my 8-year-old friends? It's
we're
like
all having a little pizza party over it.
Yeah, you just, it was ridiculous. But no, we really don't know that much about Shin, and that's part of the reason why we're even over here saying, like, look, I mean, we've been talking about Baylan mostly this whole episode, but what's Shin's role? Is she going to be the Vader to his Palpatine, or, kind of like an enforcer? What's the end game for her? Because again,
I don't know.
We actually brought this up not too long ago, is that, how we keep comparing him to Dooku? This is sort of like a Dooku Ventress. Dooku and Ventress kind of had that same dynamic as Baylan and Shin.
True, except for Asajj was way more cooler than Shin, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, but I gotta say, I do like Shin. I mean, she's kind of unhinged a little bit. Who does she remind me of? She reminds me of somebody.
She kind of reminds me of like a Alanis Morissette meets Harley Quinn or something like that. Like,
there's something about her that I kind of like, I think. But
I know what it is.
Well, I mean, look. Yeah, I mean, she's kind of hot in a way to me. I mean, I'll admit it. I kind of But I mean, getting into the the non-attraction part of the whole thing. No, she reminds me. There's some character who's like not Harley Quinn, but it's something similar where she's like completely unglued, would just like kill people. Who is she? It's like I can't remember, but that's the thing, is that I really like the fact that Shin is a little. I mean, she's kind of calm and she's not like totally psycho, but she definitely has a like that.
She actually could be Kylo's sister.
I'm gonna key your car kind of thing if you cross me or whatever. She kind of has that vibe to her. Oh yeah, definitely like a Kylo Ren kind of thing. This is interesting. Peter says, "Wonder she'll be Luke's Mara Jade or Ezra's." I mean,
I don't think Luke. I don't see her being Luke's Mara Jade, but
no, because I mean the problem is, and it really makes me wonder if and when are they going to bring Mara Jade into this thing, because they still could. I mean, there's still room for it. They could still do it, and even if you go, well, okay, in the Legends books, they ended up getting married, they had a bunch of kids or whatever. I mean, you could rewrite that part of it. You could still have shortly after, like maybe a little bit after this, he ends up running into her. They have some sort of a romance or something. And then by the time of the sequel trilogy, maybe she died, or maybe it just sort of fizzled out or whatever. Because there's enough time. There is enough time between the two that you can still bring in concepts from Legends and it would be okay. In fact, I had said, look, you and I talked about this all the time, that if they really wanted to remake Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and Last Command. If they wanted to redo that, I wouldn't want them to necessarily, but you could go Ray, Pin. I almost did the same thing. Ray, Poe, Finn. Finn and Poe, or Poe and, no, Pin and Foe. That was what it was. Pin and Foe, where we always used to say that. But you could take the sequel trilogy characters, and you could, if you wanted to, pretty much with a little bit of tweaking, you can remake those. You can make those into movies. I don't know if I would want that, but all right. Let's see. Peter says, like Lanfear on Wheel of Time, loyal to the dragon? No, I know what you're talking about, but no. It's like somebody more like pop culture. Baylan is gonna, this is Ted, Baylan is gonna sacrifice Shin. The Abeloth is a new body to host, maybe? Oh, I don't know. I don't...
She does look like Abeloth, though.
Yeah. A little. She ran away with their kid. And then, of course, Peter thought that was interesting. I mean, it's really sort of open-ended because you really don't know what the end game... Because, like, all the sequel stuff and all the, like, basically before Return of the Jedi, right? So you had Dooku, he gets Asajj Ventress. You had Vader took on a couple of apprentices. You basically knew the reason why they were doing this was to overthrow the Emperor at some point. I mean, that's just kind of the goal, It's like, okay, find somebody powerful enough, they overthrow the Emperor. Because, the first one was Savage Opress, right? That was Dooku's first sort of attempt at... and then, Ventress ended up turning him against her, or against Dooku, and, it just got kind of crazy after that. But that was always the goal. Well, here, there's really no big villain to overthrow. I mean, Baylan doesn't seem all that interested in what Thrawn's doing. Like, he's not... It's like what he's trying to do is bigger than what Thrawn's trying to do. Thrawn's trying to pretty much amass the power, almost. Rebuild the Empire. Yeah, exactly. He's trying to do the whole, like, classic power play kind of thing. Whereas, Baylan is trying to... he's off on, like, some other completely different thing, right? He wants to go to the world between... Probably. This is what we're all speculating. He wants to go to the world between worlds, and he wants to, redo everything and do things right, and just kind of mess with time and all that. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Peter Griffin says, did you see the video of the fans who decoded the words above the witch's castle as Baylan and Shin rode off? I did see that video, actually. And that was really interesting. I can't remember what they said it said. It didn't seem like it was anything like spectacular. It was kind of funny, actually, if I remember correctly. But yes, I did see that video. I've been trying to watch... I haven't done it this week, but usually what I try to do is watch, whenever a bunch of the reviews of Ahsoka come out, or just any other speculation type videos like what this one is. I like to get a feel for what everybody else is saying and see where it fits into what we're thinking. Because then, of course, we could present it to you guys and, it becomes like a thing or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be really, really interesting because, again, we only have 2 more episodes.
Yeah. We only got 2 more episodes. We have to see what happens with Baylan and Shin as far as their characters. Will they make it out? Will they, will they continue on to season 2 or will they die? We don't know. Are we going to hear more about Baylan's plan in the next 2 episodes? That's to be hopefully expected. So there's a lot going on, like you said. It's interesting, but I do like the whole writing aspect of the thread that they've been going through with the Jedi as far as their ideology and what failed, why it failed, and then how people's versions of trying to fix it, what that looks like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we're getting a little bit more diversity in the Jedi, or just some of the Force users, whether they were former Jedi, current Jedi, Padawans. I mean, it's like we're getting a little. That's one of the things about this time period that I think is actually really cool, is that we're getting a little bit more of this stuff, where we didn't really get that before. Okay, let me get this in. Matt K basically says, possible the Night Sisters worship Abeloth on Peridia? It could explain their matriarchal society. Maybe. It just depends on how much of that's, they want to bring in there. Because again, a lot of this is, look, Filoni, it's no secret that Filoni is a huge Star Wars expanded universe junkie. He's like, pretty much, like, he's into everything that's ever been, done, right? And then, of course, you also have the whole Jedi Fallen Order. Because Jedi Fallen Order, and I don't know, I haven't really heard too much of the latest one that came out. But there's like a lot of Night Sister canon in that. There's like a lot of stuff. And, it's been a minute since I've seen the cutscenes, because I played through a little bit of Fallen Order, and I couldn't get through a lot of it because, it's just like really tough. But I wanted to see all the canonical stuff. So I ended up like going and, watching, YouTube has everything, right? It's just like, okay, let me just see all the little cutscenes and all that. Because I had a friend of mine who played it, and he was like, yeah, dude, I mean, if you really are somebody who likes to keep up with the canon and like what's going on, there's like a lot of key stuff that comes out of that game. Like probably more than there should be, honestly. Because how's a casual fan going to know that, right? I mean, it's like, but I mean, Cal Kestis had a little bit of a role in it. I mean, it gets really deep. Yeah, see? Peter's up there, said, praise Kujat, ruler of all, may his reign last all. Kujat is Zepho Sith from Fallen Order. Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of like stuff in Fallen Order that actually directly relates to this in a lot of ways and creates a lot of speculation. David says, I think Shin without Ray will turn into pure evil. I would tend to go that route. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it depends. Because sometimes, you listen to things that she says and you're like, I don't know if she's really that bad or not. He says, she's the Nappa to Ray's...
Vegeta. This is Dragon Ball Z references.
Yeah, I recognize it from Nappa. Star Wars won't let a straight white male be in control too long. Exactly. Shin may be the next villain. Unless he turns out to be gay. Then they might let it go.
Right.
Peter says, Marin the Last Night Sister is Cal's girlfriend now. Yeah, that's right. Well, they thought she was the last Night Sister. And he said that was the words on the witch's castle. Yeah, I remember it was one of those like typical And I really do like those kind of Easter eggs. In fact, that's another thing that I like to do too, because especially when I watch a series like Ahsoka or whatever, I'm like, okay, I see a bunch of Easter eggs, but I know there's probably a bunch that I miss because, there's that whole fandom that's a little bit above my pay grade that notices like all this stuff. They got this encyclopedic knowledge of stuff, which I used to have once upon a time when the franchise was a little bit more contained. And I was really big into the expanded universe, so that had a lot to do with it. David says, Shin looks like a chick thirsty for blood. Exactly. Ray has a plan and a moral code. Shin doesn't seem to be deeply devoted to the code. Yeah, she seems to be more or less like loyal to him.
Yeah.
But not necessarily. But then again, if you really look at that last episode of Ahsoka, she does seem receptive to what he's trying to teach her, though. And she's a little bit calmer,
Yeah. He's also like, she responds with when he says, stop doing something. She pretty much obeys. Like, okay.
Yeah, she's pretty obedient. But it's true. Without his influence there, what would she be like? That's a good question.
Yeah, because she would have totally killed Sabine that day.
Completely. I mean, without, But a lot of that, too, is just being young and, you don't have that kind of restraint and all that other stuff. It might just be not necessarily like a pure evil thing, but more like I'm going to get the job done. And, look, this is what you told me to do. So Peter says Shin Ezra will end up being Ray's parents. Just kidding. Hey, we do know they were clones, right? Well, not them, but I mean, we know that's what Ray's parents were from Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, it's going to be weird because they can go in a lot of different directions with this. And I wonder just where they're going to go because, again, I think the Night Sisters are going to play a lot more into this than maybe what a lot of people thought. And first of all, I don't know. We don't know really how many seasons they're going to go, right? We don't know. Is this going to be, Filoni generally seems to be like a 3 or 4 season kind of guy, maybe 5. And he tends to cap it at that. And we don't really know either because look, The Mandalorian is coming up on a season 4. We don't know how much more of that we're going to get. So I think a lot of it has to do with what is the overall story arc, what is Thrawn's endgame, which we kind of know, what is, more specifically to what we're talking about tonight, what is Baylan's endgame for Shin, for the two of them. We're just going to have to, and I think you're right, I think we're going to get a lot more revealed to us in tomorrow night's episode. And obviously we're going to be reviewing that on Friday. So if you guys, and if you're jumping in on the comment section, like you're not watching this live, let us know what you guys are thinking. Because, it's cool that we're at this point right now that you could we have enough information that we could do some really intelligent speculation. Like we're not just guessing with no context, right? That's like with the Acolyte, we're kind of guessing with no context. But with this stuff, we have a lot that we can get into and discuss and really have an intelligent conversation about where some of this stuff could go, but we really don't know where it's going to go. And that's the exciting part. Peter says, what's the wrong button there? What do you think the Night Sisters want from this? I know they must hate Jedi Sith since Dooku wiped them out. Yeah, well, they also hate Palpatine too. Now, they gotta know he's dead. Well, kinda. See, that's the other thing too. Now that we know where Palpatine fits into all this, how far back are they going to go? Where it's like, when did he start his whole Final Order plan? We know when he makes himself known to the galaxy and all that stuff, but when does Snoke come into all this? We brought that up on the Ahsoka review last time. Because that's going to make a big difference. And then what's Snoke's relationship to the Night Sisters? And do they hate him because they know he's a creation of Palpatine? There's like all kinds of directions you can go with this.
I always wanted to know what Palpatine's M count is.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know. That would
how close is he to Anakin?
right. I mean, I gotta think that it's high, but
Or
it's
how close is he to Yoda? Because Anakin was more than Yoda,
right. And I have a
and Yoda was
feeling
pretty
that
powerful.
Yoda was pretty
But
powerful.
Yoda is, of course, because he has a longer lifespan to study this stuff, so he can accumulate more knowledge and have more practice and time with it because of his lifespan. But Palpatine, being a human, doesn't have that luxury, but he's equally powerful as Yoda. So it's almost, it begs a question like, I wonder how high is his count, and why didn't the Jedi kind of get to him? Because if he's that powerful, you know what I mean? Like, you think that
See,
he would
but
have popped up on the
again,
Jedi's radar?
well, that's why I've always said, I really honestly think that we could use a Palpatine origin story. It's like I don't want Solo.
Hmm.
I mean, again, Solo was good. I mean, we liked it. It was fun. But I mean, if you're really talking about just like, what do you need?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, Solo's story becomes a little bit more important because once they brought in Kira, Crimson Dawn, Darth Maul, I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
now this is something worth exploring. This is something we could have used. You didn't have to put it in the context of Solo, though. But yes, a Palpatine origin story, I think would be a good idea because even though I don't necessarily agree that you have to like tell everybody's origin story, and even though it is nice to fill in the gaps, Palpatine, though, there's a lot of key things that are
Hmm.
connected directly to pretty much his origin. And, I mean, it would just be nice to know these things.
Well, especially now that you've basically connected him to. See, it's one thing if you, okay, it made sense. Okay, he's the bad guy in the original trilogy. Okay, cool. It makes sense. You kind of showed how he ascended to power in the prequel trilogy. That makes sense. But then we didn't really get to see how that, because that's still a question from the sequel trilogy, is how the heck did he come back to begin with?
Right.
I don't think we was like, oh, I created Snoke. Well, how did you even create Snoke when you were dead, dude? Like, that
Yeah.
question still hasn't been answered. You know what I mean?
It's a
And
lot
and
of
that
things that have been answered. And that's another good point, too, because not only do you need the origin of Palpatine, you really need a little bit more explanation with this whole final order thing that he's done. And when did he
exactly, and
actually
that's
come in? I mean, yeah, they opened this whole can of worms, so to speak, when they did that. Because remember, in Colin Trevorrow's version of Episode 9,
yeah, he wasn't
Palpatine
there,
never would have been resurrected. But
right?
if you go there, well, now you got a lot of explaining to do. All right.
Yep.
David says, do you think anyone is going to die? Will the masterclass actor Thrawn throw them hands? Well, let's see. Some stormtroopers will probably die.
Right. Yeah.
Just guessing, right? Um,
Right.
no, I mean that's a good point. Like main characters. I mean, well, I could see, a plot line where Baylan dies, because if he doesn't die, then he's gonna have to be able to go on with this mission of his. And I don't know. Again, it's still a little early to figure out because number one, we don't know how many seasons Filoni wants to go with this. But let's just assume a 3 or 4 season life for this show. We really don't know. Well, what are the steps, right? Because obviously, this season has been all about getting to Thrawn, and Thrawn then trying to get to the inner core or whatever, right? But basically, the core worlds, because he's been exiled. Now, it could be that ends up being what the season's about. That really the cliffhanger for this season could be him getting back to the core worlds. And then it ends there.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like he might not actually get there in this next episode or two. It might just be like, okay, to be continued next season kind of thing. And then next season deals with what Thrawn does once he gets there. It
Yeah.
could be something like that. I mean, we don't know. So we really don't know. It's going to be hard to say who's going to live and who's going to die in this, even. But I can say this, it's not going to be any of the really main characters like Sabine or Ahsoka or,
Yeah.
But it could be.
I agree.
It could be Baylan. I could see that. Peter says, only the Purgle and a whole lot of dead clones, David. Yeah, exactly. That's about it. Because, right now, I think all the characters are pretty much necessary, Yeah. Dragonfly says, maybe Thrawn was left orders to clone Palpatine and start the First Order. That really is the only real plausible thing that I can think of at this point. If you look at the Aftermath trilogy of books, and it talked about how when, Palpatine left orders, he basically tricked the Empire into meeting above Jeddah because he had this whole plan that if he died, the Empire didn't deserve to live. And so he had this, basically his planet-wide bomb or something that was just going to wipe them all out. Now, that I think might have been written before it was going to be revealed that Palpatine was going to pop up in 9. Because now it's kind of like, well, if you're going to do the First Order, maybe it's not a good idea to wipe out your entire fleet, and have to start from scratch. But that's the problem that you have when you start just making this stuff up as, you go along. So that'll be real interesting. I don't know. That's a good question. So Peter tries to add some clarification. He says, what I'm hearing is Ezra makes it back and one left behind. Skeleton Key is supposed to... Skeleton Crew is supposed to be set in this galaxy, and Ahsoka is mentioned, which means Ahsoka must be left behind. I don't know. Oh yeah, he corrected. Skeleton Crew. Yeah, that's right. I forgot that Skeleton Crew was actually going to be during this whole thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see where that all falls. Because don't forget, there are a lot of series that take place during this little time period. In fact, some people have said that Mandalorian Season 3 is taking place as we speak during these events. David says, so will Thrawn show off his A-level fighting skills because he's such a well-written character with gravitas? Sensing some misbehavior on David's part. Probably because his hand-to-hand combat skills are something that's a very big deal in the books and in Rebels. He did demonstrate that in Rebels as well, so I would think so. It's going to be really cool to see him because, like I said, so far, Thrawn seems to be written, right from the pages of the books, right in there. They got a lot of his ruthlessness. They got a lot of his, all the stuff that we always loved about him. But so far, so good. We'll see. And hopefully that turns out to be true, right? It is Lucasfilm. They could completely drop the ball in the next few episodes. Look at, what was that? The Book of Boba Fett, actually. Didn't we say that was like one of the worst season finales of ever? And they basically had it. The episode or two that preceded the season finale was really good. So we're all like, yeah, man, we're all primed for a great season finale. And then we got what we got. So there is always a possibility that these last 2 episodes, it could just undo everything good that was done. Because again, the last 2 episodes of Ahsoka have been more on the right track. Have there been problems? Sure, there's been problems. But I think that, it's starting to make up for some of it. We'll just have to see. And then David basically says, they wrote him right from the pages of canon, where the page is dull. You said you were going to behave tonight, David. No, actually, they were never canon. This is the first... So Rebels was the first canonized appearance of Thrawn. He was brought out of Legends. But if you go back and read the Legends books, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Last Command, you'll see, very well-written character. Actually, those should have been episodes 7, 8, 9, honestly. But We won't go there. All right. So yeah, again, I think we're just going to have to wait and see. Make sure you guys join us this Friday at 11. Almost at 8 o'clock. Join us Friday night at 11 for our review of the latest Ahsoka. And yeah, we're just going to have to go from there. I'm looking forward to being live with you guys as usual. Let me just get this last one in here from Peter. He says, Skeleton Crew is supposed to have a young Max Rebo species Force user on that ship that gets lost. That'll be interesting. It's like I always knew Max had some midi-chlorians in his blood, or just great luck. It'd be great if it really was Max. But yeah, we'll just have to see. One thing's for sure, there's not a shortage of things to talk about. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, at some point, we will follow up this episode, right? Like maybe after the season finale of Ahsoka, maybe we'll revisit it because we'll have a little bit more knowledge of what's happening with this whole thing. Or, I don't know, maybe when we get, maybe like after the season finale and when we start getting some rumors. But at some point, we're going to revisit this because I think it's important to figure out where Baylan actually fits in the greater Star Wars universe. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. I see a lot of you guys have liked it already, but if you hadn't had a chance to do so yet, hit the like button because the algorithm smiles at us when that like button is hit. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. And we got some links in the description. You can buy us coffee. You can join our Discord. There's some other stuff to do if you guys are inclined and want to support us further. So until Friday, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.